Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our event on enhancing urban well-being with circular human economy. For those who don't know me, I am Filippo Di Leonardo from Harmony Nexus, and it's really a pleasure to be here with you this evening. So yeah, before we start telling you about this event, just a little more about myself, why I'm here with you today, and why did I decide to organize this event. So yeah, I started Harmony Nexus with the mission of empowering transdisciplinary conversations and collaborations across researchers, innovators, and change enablers to fundamentally try to unlock deeper truths and drive forward responsible, human-centric research innovation projects in urban setting to generate more harmonious social, economic, and environmental impact. And the reason being is because I asked myself fundamentally, in an era of unprecedented technological advancement and material wealth, are we truly living in a world of balance and harmony? And when I think about the widespread loneliness, deteriorating mental health, unsustainable business practices, and generally our relationship with nature and the climate crisis, I'm wondering if these are symptoms of a society in equilibrium, or do they reveal perhaps deeper imbalances? And so I find that harmony as a concept, which is often associated with music, actually can be defined as something that encompasses a state of balanced interaction and integration among diverse elements, leading to mutual understanding and cooperation. And it involves really the interplay of various components working together in synchrony to create an empowering outcome filled with beauty and endless possibilities. And while this may sound very philosophical and spiritual, actually harmony as a concept can be, I believe, profoundly empowering and revealing not only in music, but also when applied to the environments and economies that we live and operate in. So in our modern world, each dimension of our economy, be it economic, environmental, or social, no longer acts in isolation, but rather in an interconnected and systemic way. And so by seeking harmony between these dimensions, we can gain new and constantly evolving perspectives, realizing ultimately that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And as you can see, seeking harmony obviously asks us to consider and include more aspects, which of course can be challenging, but also profoundly inspiring and revealing, as it encourages us to broaden our horizons. And so this interconnectedness is particularly evident in cities, which serve as a great environment to explore on how can we establish greater harmony between social, economic, and environmental dimensions. And so in doing so, we can try and unlock innovative solutions that address the complex challenges facing urban environments and communities, which brings us, of course, to the event of this evening. According to the World Bank, already 56% of the world population, that is around 4.4 billion people, live in cities. And this trend is expected to continue with an urban population more than doubling its current size by 2050, at which point nearly 7 in 10 people will live in cities. And so in the context of our cities, harmony really extends beyond mere coexistence, right? It's about creating spaces where people thrive, communities flourish, but also business and nature can live in balance, trying to create new possibilities, a new economy. And this is about fostering different types of connections between individuals, business, and environments. And that is what we envision when we'll explore what could urban well-being mean. And then the second aspect of our event, or at least the topic, which is the concept of circular human economy, could potentially offer us a framework for realizing this vision, guiding us towards a regenerative practice that honor the interconnectedness, not just of supply chain optimization or sustainable resource management that traditionally circular economy is concerned with, but really expand it to all living beings and systems to embrace human-centric aspects, emphasizing holistic well-being, social harmony, and also equitable economic practices. And yeah, of course, this calls for a shift in mindset, right? From a linear extractive model to something that is restorative, that prioritizes longevity, resilience, deeper connection, and awareness. So in this evening, we'll dive into 3 subcategories, let's say, or topics. One is circular economy and social harmony. So exploring how circular practices can foster social cohesion and inclusivity, not only on a social level, but also on an economic and environmental level. We will then explore urban well-being and sustainable living. So the creation of urban spaces at the intersection of human health, environmental sustainability, and also economic prosperity. And then finally, community empowerment via circular practices. So really trying to dive into the role that communities can have in driving a transition towards circularity. So this is a bit just for us, like to kind of what we will be covering this evening. But just for us to better understand where everybody's at, I'd love to know by show of hand, and you can just, with that, there should be an icon where you could just raise your hand. How many of you are directly involved in projects that are connected to urban well-being and or circular economy? I'd be curious to know, just for everyone, actually, it'd be interesting. Okay. 2 people, 3 people. Okay, so, okay. We have some people that are familiar with the concept. Okay, that's good. Well, I can appreciate that these concepts are very complex topics, and obviously they cannot be covered in 1 hour, nor can we expect to have all the right answers, given also the novelty. But this evening is meant to be the beginning of an exploration and see together how we can get there. So our esteemed panelists, which I'll introduce in a moment, will share their insight and experiences, offering valuable perspective on these topics. But I really want to highlight that this evening isn't just about listening. It's about engaging, connecting, and most importantly, co-creating solutions that can pave the way forward towards a more harmonious future. In fact, our true wish for this evening is for you to leave at the end of this event with either 3 things: new inspiring perspectives, tangible takeaways, and obviously quality connections to enable you to drive forward projects in this direction. And so, in order to try and achieve this, you will have a chance to jump in. At the end of each topic that will be covered through a panel, we'll give you the opportunity to share your input. We'll also create little polls. And then at the end of the panel discussions, we will also have breakout rooms where you can share your thoughts and obviously connect with other participants in the event. So let's embark on this wonderful journey, and let me introduce the panelists for this evening. So our first panelist is Johnny Brow-Eyes, who is a system innovation ESG expert. Other than having a big passion for circularity, he actually specializes in helping companies move away from fossil fuel, ensuring profitability, but also facing renewable energy objectives and securing reasonable energy prices and reducing carbon emissions. He has extensive experience in the Chinese world, having lived there, and actually creates connections between China and the West, and it'll be very interesting to get his input from a different part of the world. I will make sure, obviously, to share all the speakers, the panelists, their LinkedIn, so you can connect with them and obviously take the conversation forward, as I'm sure you'll have many ideas and thoughts in your mind. Our second panelist is Tobias Schröder, who is a professor and professor for sustainability and vice president at the Potsdam University of Applied Sciences. His background in social psychology and cognitive science, and he specializes in innovation and change management related to urban sustainability transformations. And he's also developed computer models of emotion, social interaction, and human communication. Our third panelist is Phoebe Blackburn. Phoebe is an inspiring facilitator, communicator, trainer, and editor, working really to support the transition to a circular regenerative economy. But not only that, also a culture and mindset. She helps really impact their inter-organization, unlock and communicate the power of circularity in the way they operate and interact with the world. And last but not least, our fourth panelist, Alvaro Valero Sosa, who is the director of Building Health Lab. So in Building Health Lab, one of his main areas of work is the development of urban care, which is a urban health framework for municipal pedestrian planning and public space design, which was a winner of a prestigious European Commission grant, and also as a commissioning editor for the Cities and Health Journal. Alvaro spearheads the development of the City Know-How platform, which is a web environment to enhance access and user experience to scientific articles. Wonderful. So let's jump straight into the first topic, which, as we said, was circular economy or circular human economy and social harmony. So we talked about this idea of going beyond the concept of circular economy and how this concept can actually foster social cohesion and inclusivity, not only, as we said, in social, but also in economic and environmental levels. And perhaps, Johnny, I'd like to ask you, but obviously this is a question that is for all the panelists. How can we create, easy question, how can we create circular economy plans that are not only good for the environment, the economy, but also for people's happiness?
Okay, Filippo, you want me to start? I promised I would give you the perspective from China. So I'll jump in with that. So you may or may not know, but China has 5-year plans, and they are incredibly systemic with regard to how they take note of what's happening in the country. So, for example, they will systematically collect information about employment, about environmental issues, everything that is relevant, and then they collect it per city, per province, and then national. And then at the same time, they will also do this with industries. Later, they will summarize the top 3, and then the top 3 will be implemented national, provincial, city, and also industrial. So for China, the how shall I say, the eco-civilization became relevant in 2017, because in 2007 they were mapping environmental pollution, because before of the Olympics they heard Beijing has bad air quality, so they started looking into this. In the next 5-year plan, 2012, they realized it's quite bad, so they started mapping the impact from the industry on the environment. And then by 2017 they realized this is very bad, so then they started making this top priority. The 3 battles. One was environment, the other one was poverty, and the third one was financial security. So they will then implement this at the local level with KPI from local governments to address this. Now, the interesting thing is the Chinese have a very different way of looking at things. So I sometimes like to say in Europe, we often are saying, I'm entitled for this or that. In the Chinese culture, very often you will hear people say, it is my duty, I'm accountable for this or that. So that's why I would like to simply summarize CSR in Chinese context. I would not translate to corporate social responsibility, but to country social responsibility. And from the country level, people will feel this is important to help achieve those goals at a national level, but also locally. And for them, this is part of who they are. And this is also part of their community. So what is bringing them together? So this is something that most people in Europe often feel surprised about.
Thank you, Johnny. I mean, this is very interesting because obviously it's a different part of the world that has a completely different mindset. And sometimes we know so little. I mean, personally, there are so many, perhaps sometimes prejudice or ideas that we have, but this seems to be very systemic, which I guess is what we're looking for. Yes, you wanted to jump in.
Thank you, Johnny. That was very interesting. I just thought there is a very old concept in German culture, actually, and in German law that's not too different from that. It's the ehrbare Kaufmann. It's an honorable merchant. That's a legal term from the 19th century. And I think it embodies a similar idea, the responsibility of the owner of a company, of an entrepreneur, to not just make money, but to care for their city and for their employees and for their community. And then it got somehow lost over the years, and now it comes back through the guise of corporate social responsibility, maybe more influenced through the Anglo-Saxon tradition, but it's not at all foreign to our culture, what you're saying, I think.
Thank you, Tobias. And what is your take on how we can create circular economy plans that are not only good for the environment, but also for the economy and, of course, people's happiness?
Well,
May I jump
to be
in?
honest,
Tobias, I'm sorry.
Sorry, but
Yeah, go ahead, Tobias. Go ahead.
Did you want me to answer that, or?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Of
Okay.
course.
Well, to be honest, I was a bit puzzled by your question. Well, first, thanks for organizing this. This is the first time I'm participating in an event like this, so I'm quite excited and curious about it. But I also have to admit, when I saw your question, I thought, oh my God, what have I signed up to? Because to be honest, I have no idea. Now, that is a good scientist answer, actually, to say, I don't know. We have to find out through experimentation and so on. But I also want to, well, as we say in German, pour some water into the wine. I think what you expressed with your initial presentation is the longing that's very widespread in the sustainability community. But it's also not obvious to me that these two things belong together. Circular economy and environmental sustainability, I think, will not necessarily create some kind of harmonious society or community revival. Those are different goals. And I think there's a lot of projection going on that people feel the stresses. You mentioned mental health issues, which are very widespread these days. Well, it's sort of the ailments of modernity that we're suffering from. And then there's sustainability in some parts of the discourse, I think, is almost a spiritual or religious component. And people put their hopes on it that this will provide healing. And I'm not sure that's the case. These are different goals, and they have to be pursued in a scientific manner, by experimenting, by getting data, by checking what works and what doesn't. But I don't think there's going to be the magic solution and we'll make the economy circular and then everybody will be happy and harmonious. And by the way, thank you for the music analogy, which you brought up, because I thought of that too. Entirely harmonious music, I personally find incredibly boring. So the most interesting music is, I'm a big Gustav Mahler fan, if any, in case that means something to you. It's the late Romantic Austrian composer. And what's so great about that is it's the constant rupture between very harmonious, almost folksy parts of music, and then there's a long bang and everything breaks apart and it's total chaos and it's just loud, and I think that's just life, and that's also what cities are. And maybe we shouldn't aim for this. It's maybe too simple to think that we can have this magical solution. I believe we can.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And I think experimentation is part of the journey because we don't have all the answers. And I guess that's why we're here, to have inspiring conversations and collaborations and see how we can drive this change that you use the word longing. I think we can all relate to it. Wonderful.
Can I add one thing?
DB? Sure.
Very
Sure,
quickly.
John.
So, harmonious is not always the word that you would find in nature. It's very interesting. Harmony is something that we create. If you look at, for example, the heart rate variance, if your heart is beating like a clock, it means you're unhealthy. It is the arrhythmic, the difference that actually shows the health. The word really is resonance, and when there's resonance between the people in a community and the systems in a environment, that's when the magic actually is happening.
Yeah, Felipe, thanks for your question. Thanks for the invitation. I think perhaps like Tobias, when I saw the title, I thought, social harmony, circular economy. I live in Germany normally. I'm in Oxford this week, but that's an exception. And I noticed that in Germany, the concept Kreislaufwirtschaft, which now we also talk about circular economy, sort of Kreislauffähigkeit, as Tobias will know. I think I'm seeing a kind of split. I'm seeing many who are very much looking at keeping the materials in the economy. It's very kind of technocratic, very resource-based approach to circular economy. And then I'm also seeing the more social side that, oh, no, we need to also look at society. It needs to be holistic. It needs to be systemic. I'm seeing that split between, a bit those two camps. I mean, I think I'm making it simpler than it is. I mean, there are 114 definitions of circular economy. So, there's a bit of nuance in there as well.
Let's add one.
Another one, 115, okay. But I'm seeing that split in my work over the past sort of 9 years working on circular economy. And I mean, who's right? I mean, should wider society be included in the circular vision? I don't know. I mean, I think some people will strongly argue no, and others will argue yes. I mean, I'm arguing yes, but I don't know sometimes if I'm right. Perhaps that belongs to CSR. It shouldn't belong to circularity. But I feel that quite strong divide, and also in Germany, where there's very much sort of lots of engineers looking at how to keep copper in the economy. And the thing is, with keeping copper in the economy, I mean that's a very praiseworthy task and mission, but it's not exactly very inspiring in terms of a social vision. And I think that's where that vision sort of has a problem, because to get employees and people, embarked on, why do we want to do this? Why should we stop wasting? Why should we consume less? I think we need a bigger social vision, obviously, ideally a harmonious one, to get people inspired by this. Yeah. And actually, if I may at this point, Filippo, just show an illustration on my slides. I'm going to, if you can all see this. Sorry, actually, this is one. This to me is an example of really interesting collaborations in Berlin. Some of you may know this, the participants. It's called the Nochmal, and it's effectively a kind of secondhand retail store. It's not really a mall, because a mall has lots of different outlets. This is sort of one store. And what's interesting is it's set up by the BSR, which is Berlin's waste management company, as Berliners will know. They have the orange bins everywhere in town. And I went to the opening. I was invited as a guest to the opening in August 2020, just in the pandemic. Super hot day, 34 degrees. I mean, who goes to an opening of a secondhand, mall, on a Saturday? Queue all around the block. And we had to take our temperature at the entrance because of Corona and mask, all that stuff. But the vibe was amazing. It was just amazing. And I thought, oh my God, this is what we need. We need this sort of feeling of, hey, we're doing something good. We're not just shopping. We're looking for a good deal. Some of us are looking for, an old book or a toy for the kids or something, whatever. But you had all these people from totally different walks of life, different parts of Berlin, and they were all coming on a Saturday to the opening of this secondhand store. And that's what I think, to me, that's how I imagine this social harmony through circularity. And it'd be great if we can recreate this in different quarters of Berlin and in other cities, in villages. And I think, it partly does happen already with, flea markets and everything. It's a similar feeling. But I think that feeling that we need to generate. And it's also a funny wordplay. Nochmal, it means the again mall in German. And it's funny, it's a funny wordplay. And the Germans are not famous for being funny. Sorry, Tobias, but I mean, obviously you also are funny. It's not just the Brits. We don't have a monopoly on humor. But yeah, I just wanted to share that image with you all, because to me, that's how I see, circularity helping to generate. It's fun, and it's inspiring, and it's harmonious. I mean, people might be arguing over the price of something, but they're all together in this place, and you have very different people in there. It's in Reinickendorf, which is a part of Berlin that's not, I mean, it takes me a bit of time to get there. It's not super accessible, but it's accessible by public transport. And yeah, check it out when you go to Berlin, for those who don't know it. But that vibe is something that we need to remember and try to recreate to get that social harmonious feeling. feeling, I think.
Oh, thank you, Phoebe. And maybe Alvaro, given that we kind of talked about spaces, given your experience as a urban health designer, what is your take?
Well, thank you for the invitation as well, and for introducing the topic so nicely with your slides. You feel the harmony and the design of your slides very, very nicely. I will refer to the Urban Care project, which you mentioned, that we are developing, because it has really given me the opportunity to share with 4 distinctive communities across Europe. And one is in Gothenburg in Sweden. So we're structuring cases in where we're dealing with communities, very particular communities, to look at their environments and see what kind of interventions we can do in terms of climate and in terms of people's needs. Or let's say it the other way around. First, the people's needs, and then how we could solve these problems with nature-based solutions. So we've been working with the community in Gothenburg in Sweden, which is it's oceanic climate, very interesting. Another community here in Berlin, which represents our continental climate. So we're kind of like dealing with different climate conditions in Europe. With Florence, with the University of Florence, we have a collaboration to structure a case there. And the last one, well, that's inter-Mediterranean, and the last one is with Cyprus in a Mediterranean climate. So in these 4 cases, what we're doing is assessing data, environmental data, on, well, heat spots, stormwater runoff, biodiversity levels, specifically biotope loss and quality, and walkability, so spatial inequities and so on. So I'm rehearsing on this because I think it's really interesting to the different points that that you have talked about. I took some notes about what Johnny was saying in regards to China, that they're doing some kind of evidence-based planning, as we're kind of like trying to do here. But it's in a very aggregated manner. It's looking at these enormous portions of land, which are the provinces, and then aggregating that even further to the national level. And it calls my attention because perhaps assessing the needs and requirements of groups and subgroups, especially vulnerable groups, well, gets lost in the way, and it brings disparities and inequities at the end and so on, like with these one solution fits all, and so the work that we're doing here with the universities is quite apart from that, even though it's evidence-based and assessing scientific data in order to design. The other thing which well, brought my attention was what Tobias was mentioning, that goals seem to be very divorced or different, and there's like teams behind that which are just thinking different. Well, that's entirely true. And working with municipalities, it's very interesting that once we have workshops and we bring everyone together to the planning table, it's the first time that they shake hands and they say, "Hi, who are you?" "Well, I'm traffic." "What about you?" "Well, green and parks." "Oh yeah, okay." "We take care of streets and signage." And everyone should be working together and with a vision. And so that's very interesting. And we've had the chance of bringing different departments together to work in a transdisciplinary way and solve problems. And the other point is what Phoebe was mentioning, that there's so different definitions of circular economy, and well, I think that thanks to Filippo, I had the opportunity to kind of like align the work that we're doing into 3 principles that I find very important in circular economy, to operationalize them, to give them life, to really practice with these 3 principles. So I will just answering the original question, which is how can we create circular economy plans? that are good for the environment, economy, and people's happiness, I stuck to a principle which is supporting a more efficient use of resources and infrastructure. I think it's that one. No, key products and materials in use. Okay, maybe that resonates to one of the definitions that you've read. Key products and materials in use. So what that means in planning is that we should plan shared and multi-use spaces. So supporting this would support the more efficient use of resources and infrastructure. So if we plan urban spaces for multiple purposes and adapt over time, because what's important for one generation might not be important for the next generation, then we're complying with that principle. And yeah, just stop there.
Yeah, no, that's amazing to hear your perspective too. Johnny, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I wanted to add that everything which is industrial, commercial, corporate, has its process. You make something in a factory, it's separate from the logistics and it's separate from the people buying. And just what Phoebe said, it also enthused me, like what's happening between people. And you know, my washing machine gave up. It's a very old washing machine. And I was kind of like sad about it. And just 1 day later, the European Act, the right to repair came out, right? So for me, this was a happy thing. But what I did is I put on Facebook, does anybody have like an old washing machine? Because many people move and they're no longer using it. I got several people reacting. The funny thing is, I went there, but that one also was no longer working. But another friend of me contacted me and said, you know, it's probably the spring. So I ended up making a washing machine from the 2 springs. But now several people connected around this problem, and they were creative and finding a solution that is different from the path that people typically walk. So just the mere fact that you become resourceful around these things that are different from just the normal path is what I found very fascinating. It changes people.
Ultimately, it goes hand in hand, right? We have to change ourselves first. Yes, there's a famous quote from the Dalai Lama that said, I was young and smart, I wanted to change the world, and now I'm wise and old, and I'm working on changing myself first. So actually, at this point, I'd love to just open it to the public, just for, for 5 minutes, just open your mic, if you have any inputs, any ideas, that you would also like to share. In the meantime, what I'm doing now is I'm going to launch a little poll based on the first question that we explored. And it'd be great to get your views, but if you'd like to say something, so that we can see whoever is first that would like to say something. And then we can open our mic if you have also any questions. We just wanted to take in between each topic the opportunity for you to be involved and not just listen. If no one has a question, Tobias, you can, of course, keep going.
I'm not sure I'm allowed to, but I want to share an anecdote and develop it into a question about the Nochmal. I had this huge DVD collection at home, and I wanted to get mostly children's movies, and my children are grown out of it. So I wanted to get rid of it, and I thought of the Nochmal, and it might be interesting to other people, and I really liked the idea. Then I went to the BSR Recyclinghof and offered it to them, and they said, nah, nobody wants DVDs anymore these days. And then and I just had to trash them at the BSR. And I guess I'm telling this because I share the excitement in the idea, but then if I look at the reality, it's maybe a little bit more sobering, because how scalable is this actually? It's a cute project, and it's really nice, and yeah, there's this warm feeling at the opening and so on. But how scalable is it? So maybe Phoebe, you can have a few thoughts on that. And also, Johnny, I'd be interested in your perspective on it, because I'm not a China expert, but what I know from China is they really care about scale, and they care about driving hundreds of millions out of poverty. And I'm not sure, well, let's not forget that the median income on Earth is $200 a month, roughly. Half of humanity has less than that. And I'm not sure we're going to address that with a cute little community. Pardon me for being a little provocative, but I'm not sure we're going to solve these problems with that approach. So maybe you have a few thoughts on that.
Phoebe?
Yeah, happy to go. Actually, yes, and I chose these few examples on my slides. There were a few to come still. And for the Nochmal, yeah, there are, it's a fantastic initiative. It's an interesting collaboration because you have a waste management company that's kind of going actually beyond its usual business line and suddenly going to retail, which is not at all its core, its usual competence. So that's, in terms of radical collaborations, which is, I think, to me, also part of circular economy, that's a positive. It's an interesting case. It could perhaps Schule machen, as you say in German. It could perhaps, be replicated, Johnny. Perhaps not yet on a China scale, but on a German scale, perhaps first. However, obviously, yes, there are downsides. I mean, for instance, financially, the Nochmal is not breaking even. It's not yet, covering its costs, basically. So it does need that parent company that can back it. Because the massive outlay, it's they're trying to recruit sort of more local staff. There was a lot of investment to start with, and that's going to take years. I mean, I've spoken to the founder. A few years on, as I said, it's not breaking even. Okay, so you've got to bear that in mind. And I think one of the contributors in the chat, a lady, mentioned that yes, they also offer, say, workshops for upcycling. You can patch up your jeans, do all this kind of cool, super duper stuff, which is wonderful. But if you look at the local population in Heinickendorf, which Berliners will know, I mean, I've been there a few times, and I literally, and the workshops are lovely, really well designed, and you're like, great, but basically no one shows up from, that local population, because you know what, the local, often fairly recent refugees, say from, I don't know, Syria, Afghanistan, whatever. I mean, they're not necessarily going to go, oh, let's go and do some, upcycling. I mean, perhaps in time, but it's difficult to reach out to some of these populations who are actually more interested in just, surviving and getting stuff that they need in the kitchen. And that's okay. It's nice. It's okay to have those different audiences. But what I'm saying is I think that there's quite a lot of fine tuning on the social engineering side to figure out how to optimize these spaces with the audiences which are actually really there. And I think, BSR is struggling to get enough audiences for all these events that are brilliantly trying to organize and devise. And it's not really easy. But yeah, because I guess a lot of the sort of middle class bobos who might go and sew up their jeans, that they're not living in there, they're not living nearby. So yeah, there are lots of things to think about. However, the Nochmal was partly copied on the Halle 2 in Munich. So any Munich people here, which I went to see, and it was not, the one in Berlin is so much more pleasant to be in, but it's much easier, obviously, if you're copying from a model that's not ideal. So it takes time, to improve and better the models. And Johnny, yes, for the scalability, I think the Chinese can, well, perhaps, I'm sure they're doing this partly themselves, but, it takes lots of learning. You can't just copy and paste stuff. You can't just copy and paste a model and hope that it's going to be, it's going to work everywhere. That's also the problem with scalability. There are limits to scalability when you actually need to be quite local. So I think you use that word yourself, Lepo, local. You have to really balance up the global and the scalability of globality and globalism, and then the kind of local, actually, wait, that's not going to work here. And really think who's living in Heinickendorf around this Nochmal, who's going to really want to do this or use it. yeah. So it's that harmony, I guess, between the global, regional, local, and don't forget the regional as well, which I think is something strong in Germany because it's a federal country. You know, the regions have quite strong powers, say, compared to France, where I partly come from. But yeah, something to really think about, balancing the regional, the local, yeah, and the global, and, you know, trying to reach some kind of a harmony there.
Thank you, Phoebe. Yeah, I mean, no one said this topic was going to be easy, and we could be here for days. Maybe we could just move to the other subtopic, which is about urban well-being and sustainable living. And of course, all these topics are massively intertwined, right? But perhaps, and here I'd come to you, maybe Alvaro first, examining, you know, the creation of urban spaces at the intersection of, you know, human health, environmental sustainability, but also responsible economic prosperity. So in your case, given your experience, Alvaro, what step do you think we could, should, can take to apply circular and nature-inspired concepts to ultimately create spaces that foster community, promote a certain responsible behavior, well-being, but also, you know, empower maybe businesses, and that's something we can extend further than the traditional concept. What are your thoughts?
Okay, thanks. Well, I think I'll tackle that question, linking it to what was being discussed previously about scalability and where to intervene and what kind of interventions make sense and for which communities. And recently, we had the opportunity of having municipalities from Brazil to come and share their urban problems here at AERES, which is a laboratory, a metropolitan laboratory we have in Berlin, to look at these issues. And what called my attention was that every single municipality that brought very distinctive issues, housing issues. One was trying to solve a pedestrian issue at a waterfront, parks that would manage water-sensitive planning or water management, and so on. There were several cases and so on, but all of them really required interventions at the street level to define better their streets and how to intervene them in a way that become prosperous urban spaces. So in doing this exercise, we saw that many of the issues that we're talking about here could be tackled with proper streetscaping, with I'm talking about climate issues, social issues, increasing small business accessibility to small businesses, even informal market activities or eventual ones. So I think that doing that exercise with municipalities in Brazil and thinking over what's happening in Berlin, that we have such movements as the Kiez block that are not going for streets, but for entire blocks of the city, and rethinking them and making communities much stronger with that. Well, that's away from the small intervention of, you know, perhaps exchanging books and pants and old clothes and so on. I'm not downsizing that kind of intervention. They're very interesting and important, but not to that scale, and not to the scale of this huge territorial, you know, one size fits all plan. So we see that in Berlin, we could actually do a lot of interventions in sidewalks, like unsealing the pavement. We have a lot of pavement that could be unsealed. We have if you map it, you can see that we have urban furniture, which is authentic from each neighborhood, from our little Kiez, and where you put planters, which are from the community, and even playgrounds, which are equipped with big toys, which come from the community, and that is super interesting because that's an expression of local culture, which is tackling all these different issues at once: well-being, for sure, and climate as a second best. So yeah, that's my take on that.
Yeah, wonderful input. Tobias, I can see you have something to share.
Yeah, I was just wondering,
Maybe
Alvaro,
this-
like unsealing pavements. I mean, I'm in Oxford at the time, and literally I'm taking the bus all over the place. It takes forever. So I get to see a lot of front gardens or not really front gardens at all. But I noticed that so many houses here have a totally sealed kind of concrete or piece, gravel front bit, and it's awful. It's really depressing, and it's just, yeah, I mean, unseal, can we unseal all this?
Sure.
Could Oxford City Council, I don't know if you're here, probably not, unfortunately, in this, you know, why can't they incentivize people, you know, even monetarily say, hey, you know, we will give you this reward, or we will help you, here are the seeds, and you know,
not even
to
that.
plant stuff instead of sealing all their front gardens. I mean, I know it's more work. It takes a lot of work, you know, to plant stuff, and it's yeah. But it's
Well,
just,
yeah, it's a communication issue. And since you said you were into communication, I'll give you this tip. The incentive doesn't have to even be from the local government. The incentive is through communicating that in hot summers, if you have evapotranspiration, if you have unsealed pavements, well, you will save a lot of energy and cooling. And it also applies for winter. I mean, if you have the proper greenery, well, it protects your windows, facades, and so on. And that could also save energy and heating. So it's communicating the benefits of having nature-based solutions right there at your doorstep, and then further on in your neighborhood, and then the district, and so on. So yeah, that's the incentive, and not to
I shall
count
pass that
with
on. I shall pass that on to the city council here. Well, thank you.
and stormwater runoff, for example. Treating water is so expensive, especially in Berlin, and to control that, to manage that would be great in savings.
Yeah, Alvaro. Tobias, yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on the
this is one area of the nature-based city planning of which Alvaro mentioned some great examples, where I really agree that there is a natural win-win between social well-being or psychological well-being and environmental sustainability, because there's lots of research to back up the notion that green space in cities is good for mental health and good for health overall. And also there is interesting evidence, if you look over the centuries, we talk a lot currently about old houses in problematic terms, and because they're not carbon efficient and need retrofitting and newer heatings and that stuff. But there's another take on it. If you look at the medieval city structures in Europe that have grown organically, these are incredibly adaptive to all sorts of changing social and economic circumstances. These are structures that have been in place in some instances for centuries or even millennia, and they work. They still work, and they're very valuable also in long term from an economic perspective. So I think that there's really a case to be made for, I think, for nature-based and organic approaches to city planning. And the 20th century, with the visions of the auto-centric city and the modernist plans, really created a lot of damage, in my opinion. And unfortunately, it's not so easy and not so harmonious at all to leave the path dependencies of the modernist city, because it creates all sorts of conflict, which we witness every day in a city like Berlin. If you think of the competition between cars and bicycles and parking space and green space, and those are hard fights and they're not harmonious at all. But I think there's a really scientific case to be made to sort of turning back the clock to a previous age of city planning that had grown through a process of evolution.
Thank you, Tobias, for writing also this historical lens, which helps us see whether history rhymes or repeats. Johnny, maybe it'd be great to get your views, you know, maybe from you know, helping businesses and also understanding how China can maybe teach us something, what we can learn from them if they have different approach. in this
First of all,
regard.
yeah, I'll add something. First of all, I really am appreciating the different inputs from everybody. It's interesting. On the scalability and implementation. So, you know, the way it happens in China at top level, they come with certain teams. And the teams now are that the clean rivers and blue skies and the mountains are a valuable asset of the country. So people basically will realize, okay, this is important for the country. Whereas in the past, it really was not perceived as something valuable. So at the high level, they think in terms of how do we make people associate, resonate with that. And then it's very structured. For example, now there's a professor in China that is making a carbon footprint index for each city to define like how well is a city actually on a carbon level with regard to the different functions like industry, society, and where is that city with regard to the best in class. And of course, different cities may have a different level of progress, so they have different functions in there, and therefore also different levels. But by making this clear, and they're using big data, and they're working together with universities all over the world, they are now able to give cities indications like, hey, here's where you can improve on integrating certain functions and getting the best on, for example, low carbon performance. Now, the way they implement this is always at the local level, because once they know this here, the teams, and they implement it like top down, like I just said, it trickles down to the lowest level. And just like Alvaro said, you know, it might be some people just helping to install a place where they can do exercises. And that's part of the society, the culture as well. They do this Qigong exercises. The old people are training in the parks. They have like new running walkways. And so that all in combination with education, where the children are learning that, with media, where basically this is being repeated, that is important. And at the implementation level, the government, the industry, and the institutions always working together for rolling out, like what can we really do? So it's really a combination of teams, culture, systemic rolling out, but always local engagement, so that people feel the pride of actually helping to implement some of these things.
Johnny, yeah, it's interesting.
Perspective.
If you look at China, I guess, I mean, I've been there myself, and clearly, I mean, the sense of civic pride is quite different, really, to what we have perhaps in many parts of Europe, I would say, and also the homogeneity of the population. I mean, China it's not exactly super mixed. I mean, in terms of kind of ethnic origins from lots of people from many different continents. I mean, that's my impression. I mean, I may be wrong. I mean, I guess obviously Beijing's not going to be the same as Xi'an, or I don't know. Yeah.
The minorities,
I think,
have a very different approach to how they solve these issues.
Yeah.
And that's what actually makes it interesting, because that's another aspect. So they do real-time policy implementation when they roll out new initiatives to solve issues that they share. But then they will take the best example and they roll that out in the other regions via what I just told you. I call it the triple helix. So the local government, the local institutes, and the local industry or business environment. So whenever something is valuable, they will actually incentivize it by making it profitable. And even things that are not economic yet, for example, recycling certain kinds of waste or certain kinds of chemicals, they basically will make it feasible. I remember a conversation with CEOs from large chemical companies, Shanghai government, and they were asking me, Johnny, can you ask them, do they have a technology to recycle a specific chemical compound? And I asked them, I translated, and they were surprised. They say, yeah, I mean, this is part of our chemical process in the factory, but there's no way we're going to do this because this is not economically viable. It's cheaper to just get new. And they said, no, don't talk about economic viability. We can make it viable. So ask them again, if it's technologically viable, possible. Yeah, it's possible, but I mean, logistically, it's impossible to do. No. We will arrange the logistics if it makes sense. And we will incentivize those who have the solutions, those who implement it. And as soon as it's viable, then they will let it go. So this is, for example, also why China just makes leapfrogs on electric vehicles. And, you know, before COVID, nobody saw the electric vehicles from China coming. Now, post-COVID, I mean, I don't have to explain this to you, right? I've seen it several times. They make it possible.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's also the difference between democracy and an autocracy, where, you know, an autocracy, well, you know, you just decide something and roll it out. Whereas, you know, we have to kind of have lots and lots of,
Yeah, but you know, they
different,
incentivize it by giving the companies budget to innovate and by making it cheaper for the people to buy electrical cars. So they look at finding the solutions, seeing what is the economics behind it, but also, most importantly, the implementation. For example, e-commerce, it just skyrocketed. Do you know that the government basically has been giving budgets to all people that they can use on this e-commerce? So that they basically are incentivized, hey, I can get 100 euro for free if I know how to buy it from the system. I have to ask my grandson, right, how to do that. So this is how they just, for COVID, when you get injections, people would get a few boxes of milk or eggs, simply because they know that they care about that at that time. It's fascinating how it works.
Do you think it would be
wonderful.
transferable?
Sorry?
Or do you think some elements of it would be transferable?
Well,
It's, by the way, I just saw in the chat, I think it's related to a comment that about that seems like what people value most are the things that go against sustainability. So how can we shift minds or something like that? I have to say, from my own research, I've become quite skeptical about the viability of changing minds. I've had lots of research projects about that. So is a more autocratic way of managing things the solution, Johnny, even in our liberal democracies?
Well,
would it work? Is it worth the trade-offs and so on?
Tobias, thank you for asking that question, because you're touching my heart now. So this is why I mean, my company is CSI. That's not crime scene investigation. It's collaborative systemic innovation. If you look at each other's systems, you know, each other's ways, you will find ways to improve. You don't need to take over everything from the other side, but there are things you can learn from each other, and you can actually scale up and increase speed together. And the answer is yes, it is possible, because, you know, a Chinese person is not different from a European person with regard to what they want to take care of. They want to make money. They want to take care of the family. They want to do something interesting. It's just that the way they carry a level of responsibility is indeed somewhat deeper, but that's the Confucianist society. But that doesn't mean that you can't incentivize people in the same way, knowing what incentivizes them. And that is the key thing. You know, for example, I find it interesting. I can now see Europe is looking at how can we also subsidize the industry. But, you know, if you now subsidize the big factories to be built, it's basically the big companies that are going to get the money, and whether or not they can keep up, it's not even sure, because will they be competitive? So if you plan ahead with these things and you look at who are the different stakeholders in society, what makes it implemented, you can start incentivizing and facilitating the stakeholders in the right way. But very, very importantly, always constructive, always positive. So I noticed that here we often tend to punish or to tax. There they incentivize, they reward. That's the big difference.
I would like to illustrate what Johnny is saying. It's super interesting, talking about trade-offs. And well, from our small experience at a very, very small scale, we do find this friction that perhaps Tobias, as you were mentioning, of car owners with pedestrians, with bikers, and how to actually change the mindset to give up your car, and because there's a better plan, a better vision, which is more inclusive, which is about livability, and all these very abstract concepts which are very difficult to communicate and to digest, because you don't see what the trade-off is there, because it's my car. I have the liberty of going to A to B to C whenever I want, and there's no super sidewalk that can actually beat that one. So how do you negotiate with those very, very different mindsets? And the way that we figured out how to deal with these issues is to actually not point out how many tar spots are going to be striked out or eliminated from a certain neighborhood, because that's the unfortunate strategy that some stakeholders have. I'll say it openly. Sorry, I'm a little bit slow today. I have a newborn. I have hardly slept, so bear with me, please. So organizations like Kids Blocks that yeah, they're all in for bikers first and then pedestrians and so on, and we have to take out 200 car places from this neighborhood, from this block. Shoots, that's not the way of winning over these people. What we tried to talk through was, look, what about taking out 3 parking places from the entrance of a school? Who would say no to that? Because blocking the entrance of the school actually prevents accidents. Those kids leaving the school will have a better visibility, and drivers have a better visibility of the kids leaving the school. So we have to take out 3, 4 parking places from that entrance. What about eliminating entrances or car places from entrances to playgrounds? And then supermarkets or primary care, secondary care units, or that's what we have here in Germany. We have secondary care offices that we could freely go walk there. And so, well, the elderly have issues if you have a car parked right in front of it. So why don't we free these spaces? Who would say no to that? Well, give me the list and I'll sign for it. I'll sign that petition. So it's a matter of, again, of communicating what the benefits are, and yeah, and the priorities, and listing those priorities clearly, and not just, going to the statistics of, well, this neighborhood has 5,500 car places, and we have to get rid of 300. Well, that doesn't work.
Thank you, Alvaro. I have to be a bit of a time police. So we have actually one more question, and then for those who came late, we're going to have a little breakout room session where we can network. As I said, very important for this to be interactive and collaborative. And I think we've kind of touched on it. Maybe we could close with the last question is, okay, so how can we get the community engaged to build and promote, circular practice that work well? To jump in. Tobias, maybe you're the psychologist, the cognitive scientist here. What answer would you give?
Well, I think we already covered a lot of these issues. The example we discussed earlier, the Nochmal, is a great example. There are lots of these things like repair cafes, community gardens, bike sharing initiatives, and so on. And yeah, I think we need an experimental spirit, and we need entrepreneurial practices in the sense that we also discussed earlier, in the sense of understanding entrepreneurship not just as a means to make as much money as possible as quickly as possible, but in the sense of a duty to the community, might be the Chinese expression, or the honorable merchant, coming back to the German cultural equivalent, and then figure out what works. And we also have to admit that we can't control it. We just have to see what evolves, and what ultimately all innovations come from a niche, and the innovators are also often regarded as crazy, and then later they were the ones that were right. But unfortunately, there's no possibility to tell before. So we just have to sort of let it grow and see what happens, and get into that positive experimental mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, social problems are not engineering problems. We don't know the answer beforehand. We are complex as human beings, I guess. So perfect. Anyone else who would like to jump in on this topic about how can we empower communities?
I guess as a communicator here, I mean, you have to really use empathy and really think, well, who are the communities here? You know, who, I mean, you just think of your local Keats in Berlin or wherever you live, you know, who actually is living here. I mean, in my block in Berlin, I know that a lot of the people living in my building would not do the kind of, you know, social activities or cultural activities that I would necessarily do. And yet, whenever my choir sings a concert, I put the poster downstairs and say, hey, I'm singing this concert, and just kind of hope that perhaps, you know, somebody might think it's cool and come along. Even though I think, oh dear, that they won't appreciate that kind of music at all. I just think, well, you know what? I'm in this kind of community of this building that's not really a community. And it's a gesture to try and you know, reach out to the people kind of living around me. And I mean, sometimes people laugh at me and say, oh my God, you know, you're wasting your time. But yeah, how can we, I mean, I'm also a hopeless optimist, or I wouldn't be on this panel probably. But, you know, how can we, I mean, the key word we use in France a lot is robustesse, robustness, and it kind of goes with resilience. And it's, you know, how can we make our communities more empowered and more robust and more able to express themselves and say what they want. And I think in Berlin, I often feel like my neighbors, I feel that they're quite disenfranchised. I feel they're scared. I think they feel, quite a few of them, the kind of less wealthy ones, feel a bit taken over and a bit unable to say, well, actually, I want this, or I don't like that, or yeah, that's kind of my feeling as a foreigner arriving in Berlin sort of 7 years ago. So yeah, how can we think of that topic of resilience in communities, and of helping people to say what they want, and what channels would they use anyway? You know, I don't know.
Fair enough. We actually have someone from the audience, Isabel, who we would love to hear from. Hi, Isabel. How are you?
Hi, Filippo. Great to see you. Thank you for organizing this. I think it's a really good thing to think about, and it's something we really need to be doing as a community. So I just wanted to share one project we are working on. I'm working with CERC, the Circular Economy Research Center at the business school from École des Ponts in Paris. And we're experimenting with a new form of community engagement for the circular economy. It's a European funded project. It's called the Shared Green Deal. And the main idea is that we are educating our local partners in 5 different European cities throughout Europe, in Slovenia, France, Cyprus, etc., on how to learn to change models, business models into more circular ones. And this education is in purpose made to help local companies to change their business model into more circular ones. So we're trying to create multiplicators, and the project is designed as an experimental way to find out what are the things that help and hinder the change, the transformation of these business models at a local level. So the idea is that it's a pilot for creating these kind of hubs and engaging the communities, because as great and I don't know, the results of the
say it in French.
The top-down, of the top-down results you're reaching in China. We're trying a bottom-up approach because we think we really need to be changing heart and mind somehow. And we're trying to do it through the understanding of what circular business model can mean for your community and your company as such. And we really have a good feedback from the multiplicator, how it's being taken on their communities. And so it's actually an interesting thing. We're just in the middle of the experimentation, so I can't give any results. But I think it's also a new way to creating let's say the community engagement through the understanding what it means for them or what it could mean for their community and happiness, if you will. Thank you, Filippo.
Thank you, Isabel, for your input. It's inspiring hearing your thoughts and perspectives. Alvaro, you also wanted to add maybe one last thing before we do breakouts? You're on mute.
About mute.
Okay, now you hear me. Douche again. I wanted to again connect with what Phoebe was saying about putting that post-it there in your hallway and that maybe you're losing your time or whatever it is. Well, shoots, I don't think so, first of all, and it's a matter of visibility. And when we talk about visibility, is again I bring the street issue. Because public space starts there at your door. And if we plan for having that visibility across the street, I mean, all these little subgroups and groups and that we do need to know better, that we do need to know what their needs are, what they want to do, what the potential that we have in our neighborhoods, the resources, both economic, but most importantly, skills that we have there that have to be set in practice and solving problems that we don't have to, we shouldn't let authorities solve all our community issues. So that kind of visibility can be planned and designed in the street realm. So that's my take on an engagement and in community strengthening communities.
Thank you, Alvaro. Perfect. Well, again, I have to be the police doctor, the time doctor here. So I think there's definitely lots of food for thought, and as you can tell, we could just talk for way longer, but I guess this hopefully is the starting point of something. And as I said, what I would love to do now is just to have a little breakout room. So for all of you to get a chance to network, share your ideas, connect with others, because fundamentally we believe that this is obviously very important. So it's a great way to maybe, introducing yourself, maybe share what was your main key takeaway today and why and how maybe it's relevant to the work that you're doing, and see if you could connect with other participants and drive forward, hopefully, productive collaborations. But before I do that, I just wanted to take a moment, first of all, to thank all of you for participating, of course, and the panelists. It's been a true pleasure. And also, as our goal is to make these gatherings, whether offline, online, we'll see, hopefully both, as meaningful as possible for you, both in terms of topics covered, format of the event, and networking opportunity. We've created a short form where you can leave your feedback. It will help us more than anything tailor this and other initiatives to your specific aspirations and needs. And also in the form, you'll have a chance to request a recording, as well as a summary report that we'll probably put together, highlighting some of the key topics that were covered in this event. So I'm sharing the link in the chat. And of course, please connect and reach out with our panelists, as I'm sure they would be eager to explore collaborations or answer any unanswered questions. And likewise, for any questions you may have, any ideas you'd like to explore or collaborate, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you haven't already, I'm sharing my link in the chat. And yeah, thanks again for joining, and enjoy the breakout rooms for those who want to stay in network and further explore our minds and hearts, of course.